Hello, listeners, and thank you for tuning in to Trend Talks. On today's episode, we shall be talking about digital transformation in its broader sense, a topic that has surely seen increased relevance in the past years. Joining me today is Michel Ganado, a partner within PwC Malta's consulting practice. Thank you for joining me, Michel.
My pleasure.
Michel, from my perspective as a non-techie person, the word digital means like software, IT equipment, data, etc. But when one adds the word transformation, it suddenly takes a completely different meaning. And when in business, it includes a cultural shift as well in the workplace. So my first question is, what does digital transformation really mean for today's business leaders?
I think the starting point is making a distinction between technology and digital transformation, because whereas technology is very much an enabler for helping businesses thrive, digital transformation is much broader and comprehensive. The starting point is essentially how one brings strategy, operations, and combines it not only with technology, but with things like innovation, the analytics side, and also the design of how a business functions. And all this, when you bring all these different components together, is what enables a business organization then to experience that rapid productivity and rapid growth along the full value chain of a business. So at the end of the day, this is what digital transformation is all about. It's very much a business-driven initiative rather than something that's just the sort of aspect for an IT manager to be focusing on.
I think it is a business strategy, but with the final aim of improving customer experience as well.
Very, very much so. In fact, I think it's also important to recognize that, particularly, in more recent years, there has been an increased focus on the customer centricity of business models. One would argue, customers have always existed within a business environment, but what's different about what we've been experiencing in the past few years? And I think the key maybe factor driving this fundamental change is with the emergence of things like smartphones, for instance, and technology that has, in a way, brought consumers to be demanding services and products on demand 24/7. So businesses have had to transform the way they operate, the whole business model around the customer, because if you don't provide it to customers will just move on and seek them elsewhere.
Very true. In fact, I was reading an article recently. It said that rather than being customer-centric, businesses have to be customer-obsessed.
Very much
so. To show sort of the level of centricity there is around customers.
In fact, even internally at PwC, we tend to look at digital transformation along three different axes. So it's not just the technology side. It's important to be looking at the business and the business strategy. But in our BXT model, there's also that X that is so important. And that X stands for the experience, whether it's the employee experience, whether it's the customer experience. It's all related to the design of how those products and services are being delivered ultimately to the customers out there. Because at the end of the day, that's where the competitive edge sort of comes into play.
Whilst preparing myself for this podcast, I was reading a bit about digital transformation, and I was impressed how much focus is given on the theoretical side, so to say, rather than giving me some practical examples around how you bring digital transformation in business. Would you be able to share with us some tangible examples around this?
Sure. I mean, excuse me. Again, one has to see, sort of digital transformation can either be enterprise-wide, or otherwise, sort of one can be looking at certain pocket areas within a business organization of how to ultimately bring about innovation in a particular area. This also ties in, particularly on the innovation side, in terms of how one can be leveraging certain emerging technologies like robotic process automation, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. And the challenge here is leveraging these technologies. So, for instance, within organizations, how can one be eliminating a lot of manual processes and bringing in robotic process automation type of solutions that sort of do the job without the need of that manual labor input, and at the end of the day, much more efficiently and effectively. That's very much at a singular level. If you take that and extrapolate it then across a business organization in terms of bringing in new enterprise resource planning solutions, CRM solutions across the board. This is very much sort of what organizations have in mind. I mean, if we look at the past 12 to 18 months with the COVID experience, and we've seen how some businesses have had to, I would say, overnight transform themselves to be able to continue to operate. That has been very much, again, we're not just talking about an e-commerce type of solution, but needing to change the way that they transact and do business.
Another element that I find a bit surprising when I read about digital transformation is that it gives you this vibe that once you include digital transformation or it enters the boardroom, it's suddenly everything is successful, more efficient, etc. But in my head, surely there are blockers to digital transformation, and sometimes there could be failures as well.
Certainly.
What would lead to this, in your opinion?
Before I answer that question directly, I guess at a boardroom level, one needs to understand that sort of nowadays, particularly, the option to go down the digital transformation route is no longer an option. So ultimately, if companies fail to innovate, they're planning to fail in the long run. And one needs to just look at some classic examples like the Kodaks, the blockbuster videos of this world, Nokia phones. I mean, who would have thought that when they were at the peak of their performance, sort of today they sort of let's say less relevant. On the other hand, one has to also recognize that it's not a guaranteed success. One needs to embark on these digital transformation initiatives, and what would be the successful criteria for success? I guess first and foremost, you need to ensure that you've got the right level of sponsorship at the board level and within the sort of senior management level. And when I say level of sponsorship, not necessarily within the IT area, but you've got even certain organizations of a certain size today that are appointing chief digital officers in addition to CTOs and CIOs. So that's the level of importance that they give in these initiatives. But then, sort of you get your other classic constraints, which is, lack of resources. And also the ability to recognize that, if you don't projectize these initiatives, having the right level of ambition, needing to look not just short-term, but long-term, particularly when it comes to incurring costs. Unfortunately, there's always a tendency to look at the cost side and go into cost-saving mode for obvious reasons sometimes, but, forsaking a lot of the longer-term benefits that might come into play.
From the examples you have given, even mentioning companies, we tend to, mention the huge multinationals. But would you say that digital transformation is relevant as well for the smaller businesses?
Definitely, and this goes back to the examples I used before. Whether you're, a large organization that's implementing across the board, or whether you're a small organization that needs to leverage and innovate, at the end of the day, irrespective of the size of an organization, there are always going to be innovation opportunities.
I think this is a very important key takeaway, that sort of this topic is of relevance to any business who wishes to be in business, even in the short, medium term. Together with digital transformation, there is a lot of mention of data. I must admit, personally, I love data, I love statistics. It gives you a lot of insight, and it supports decision-making, in my view. What is exactly the role of data in digital transformation?
Everything. I mean, we're living in the information age. We're living in an age where, or at least let's go back in time, where messages used to be, sent a message, someone riding on a horseback and maybe arriving 2 weeks later to deliver a message, to today's day and age where, through things like social media, Twitter, and everything else, you've got everything in real time. And that has a significant impact on business organizations, because at the end of the day, to remain in that competitive sphere, you need to have timely information, you need to have relevant information, you need to have layered information that's helping you have those insights, like you mentioned, and taking informed decisions. Organizations sit on a lot of information. So just think of all the thousands of different spreadsheets that are all lying around in any organization. But the key challenge here is how to, through digital transformation, make sense of that data and ensure then that the relevant information is continues to come in a timely and accurate manner.
Whilst you were sharing this insight with us, I was thinking about Netflix, for example. Whereas before, we used to watch television or have the videos and whatever. Today, when I switch on Netflix, it shows me what films or series I would like based on my past views, which is impressive, sort of. They are using data to improve my customer experience as well. So we can see it practically in our everyday life as well. So far, we have focused a lot in terms of digital transformation, like the senior roles, the decision makers as well. But I would imagine in order to successfully implement digital transformation, there needs to be like buy-in from all staff. And there needs to be, in my head, a robust change management system in order for it to be successful. What are your views?
No, I mean, definitely. First of all, let's recognize that human nature doesn't like change. So we all like to be in the comfort zone, and when someone comes up with a nice idea of why don't we change this, our automatic reaction is, let's leave things as they are. But I think it's important that one recognizes and comes up with what I call that value proposition as to why change is needed. And I think it's also important to keep in mind that as you've got more of the younger generation coming into the sort of labor market. This is a generation of people that have grown up and are immersed in technology. And I would go so far as to say that even to be able to attract this talent, you need to be digital savvy. So it's not just a question of changing maybe the older generation, but also having an organization that is able to attract and bring in. And I think the balance in all this, like you mentioned, change management is all about ensuring ultimately that you're bringing about the right change in behaviors, attitudes, making that change stick ultimately within the organization. It's not easy. It's something that obviously takes time for people to come round and understand that ultimately, change is being done for the benefit of everyone. But sort of this is something where sort of a lot of organizations recognize the value of going down this path.
Michel, I have a bit of a personal question. Unplanned as well. It's a bit my curiosity as well. You have been in the profession for quite some time. In what way have you seen digital transformation transforming the business landscape along the years, sort of from someone who has been there for decades, I can say? What would be your position on this?
Well, I mean, I started off after university in the mid-80s in computer programming. So very much, I would say, sort of part of the first wave of the IT community, small IT community at the time. But then sort of within the PwC ecosystem, obviously, sort of it wasn't just IT and looking at the broad aspect of things. But if you were to look a bit at sort of how the different waves of IT introduction has come into the sort of business community, I think this has been quite a radical change in terms of the perception and I would say reliance on the sort of digital aspects of IT solutions from the time that, even when I joined the firm, there was just one PC within the office that was used for word processing to try and automate the production of accounts. But again, if you stop and think about it, that was also innovation for that particular point in time. To, I guess, sort of the transition as we've seen over the past year, where because of remote working and all that, we've still had the office fully functional, even though we weren't at all times in the office. So, sort of that transition from the very beginning to where we are today. And again, this is not just sort of our firm, but I would say every business organization. I think if you were to go to any boardroom today, no one in their right sense of mind would question why should we invest in digital transformation.
Very true. I think the question would rather be, how come we didn't do this before?
Well, again, going back to that change management, it takes time for people to come around. So, okay, in Malta, we traditionally we're never ahead of the curve. We're always sort of following up in terms of what the larger, more mature countries do. But I would say at the same time, we haven't been lagging behind either.
It's impressive how time flies. So I have my last question for you. And this is around the key takeaways from our conversation. It was a very insightful even for me. So for our listeners, what would be the key takeaways of this discussion?
I think the first one I would put forward is, to business leaders out there, don't rely on past successes. Sort of one needs to constantly be looking at how to innovate. And, sort of to try and use information as a company resource. We're talking about, data and the role of data, and this is where digital transformation really helps business organizations channel the right level of data to give you that sort of additional level of ultimately competitiveness within a market. And then obviously the key role of the C-suite, the right level of sponsorship, and the program, project, and change management disciplines that are needed to embark on these particular initiatives.
I know I told you it's the last question, but I thought of something else as well. In terms of students who are listening, so the student community, which we are very close to, what would be your tips, your suggestion for those who would like to embark in line with this profession?
No, I mean, digital transformation again is something which you don't necessarily need to just box in within an IT environment. At the end of the day, going back to my sort of statement at the very beginning, it's bringing together strategy, operations, innovation, technology, design, customer experience. So it's a bit of a melting pot. So ultimately, in a way, it's anyone studying different. As long as, when you go into the working world, you realize that it's important to have a digital outlook. Ultimately, that's something to keep in mind.
So students, please take note of this.
Very much so.
Michel, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me. And of course, thank you to all our listeners for tuning in.